The Battle of Jemappes took place near the town of Jemappes in Hainaut, Belgium near Mons during the War of the First Coalition, part of the French Revolutionary Wars, one of the first major offensive battles of the war. It was a victory for the armies of the infant French Republic and saw the French Armée du Nord, which included a large number of inexperienced volunteers, defeat a substantially smaller regular Austrian army. General Charles François Dumouriez, in command of an army of French Revolutionary Volunteers, faced the Imperial army of Field Marshal Duke Albert of Saxe-Teschen and his second-in-command François de Croix, Count of Clerfayt. The French, who outnumbered their opponents by about 3 to 1, launched a series of enthusiastic but uncoordinated attacks against the Austrian position on a ridge. At length the French seized a portion of the ridge and the Austrians were unable to drive them away. Saxe-Teschen conceded defeat by ordering a withdrawal. Dumouriez, intent on invading the Austrian Netherlands, advanced late in the season and attacked the Austrians with greatly superior forces. Jemappes was won by costly but effective charges against the Austrians' prepared position. Dumouriez overran the Austrian Netherlands within a month, but lost it at the Battle of Neerwinden in March. The French would not reconquer the Austrian Netherlands until the summer of 1794. Background: in the summer of 1792, Charles Dumouriez, the French foreign minister and commander of the Armée du Nord, had believed that the best way to prevent an Austrian and Prussian invasion of France was to invade the Austrian Netherlands. But the Allies had launched their invasion before Dumouriez was ready to move, and he had been forced to move south. The Allied invasion had been at Valmy on the 20th of September, where the French army stood up to an artillery bombardment, and proved that it would not flee at the first sign of opposition. The Allied commander, the Duke of Brunswick, was not willing to risk a full-scale assault on the French line, and withdrew after it. This left Dumouriez free to move north to first lay siege to Lille in late September and into early October, and then to launch his long-planned invasion of the Austrian Netherlands. His original plan for a three-pronged invasion had to be changed, as the promised resources to achieve it proved unavailable, and instead, at the end of October, he concentrated most of his men in front of Valenciennes and marched towards Mons, and away to Brussels. Opposing forces: Austrians. The Austrian army was commanded by Duke Albert of Saxe-Teschen, the governor of the Austrian Netherlands. Although he had more than 20,000 troops available, they were scattered in a long defensive line, and so at Jemappes he fought with only 11,600 infantry, 2,170 cavalry and 56 guns. With this power, he tried to defend the 5-mile-long Cuismes Ridge, which ran from Mons in the Austrian left to Jemappes on the right side. The Austrian right was commanded by Franz Frère von Lilien, the centre by Franz Sebastian de Croix, Count Clerfayt, and the left by Johann Peter Frère von Bülow. Lilien had 7 companies and 4 infantry battalions and 3 squadrons of cavalry on the left, while Clerfayt had 3 infantry battalions and 4 squadrons around the village of Cuismes, and Bülow had 3 battalions of infantry on the hills south of Bertheimt with 5 companies of infantry and a squadron of cavalry guarding his left. 2 other companies were further to the left around Montpellier, and an infantry battalion was at Mons. The Austrian army positioned themselves on the marshes around the Treuil groves and rivers, with 2 dams to the rear. The only other way for a retreat was via Mons. French Dumouriez had twice as many men as the Austrians. His own Armée du Nord contained 32,000 infantry, 3,800 cavalry and 100 guns, and was supported in Jemappes by a further 4,000 men and 15 guns under General François Harville. Dumouriez's infantry battalions contained 13 volunteers from 1792. Havel's men were also volunteers, but most of the older commanders were either experienced soldiers or aristocrats. The most obvious example was the commander of the French centre, the Duke of Chartres, who had assumed the name of General Égalité, and would later become King Louis-Philippe of France. The right wing was commanded by General Pierre de Riel, Marquis de Bournonville, and left of General Louis-Marie de la Causse-Chaudet-Ferron. Havel was to reinforce the right. Dumouriez planned to use his army's numbers to overtake the Austrian position. The plan was for Havel and Bournonville to attack first, and surround the weak Austrian left. Ferron would then capture Guaragnon before Jemappes. Bournonville would then attack the Austrian centre, while Havel moved to Montpellier to cut off the Austrian retreat. Battle. See Jemappes 1792 Order of battle for details of the Austrian and French organizations. Saxe-Teschen entrenched his 11,628 infantry, 2,168 cavalry and 56 guns along the Jemappes Ridge just a few kilometers west of Mons. The Austrian artillery included 14 12-pound cannon, 36 6-pound and 3-pound cannon and 6 7-pound howitzers. The north end of the position, defended by Marshal Lieutenant François von Lillian, was anchored on the village of Jemappes. Feldmeister Count Clerfayt commanded the centre and Marshal Lieutenant Johann Peter Bewley led the left wing. The Austrian right wing faced to the west, while the centre and the left wings faced toward the southwest. The village of Jemappes lay behind the Austrian left. One flaw in the position was that an Austrian retreat could only be made across a single bridge over the Hainaut River. Dumouriez had 32,000 infantry, 3,800 cavalry and 100 artillery pieces. He expected to be joined by an additional 4,000 troops on the right under General Louis-Auguste Juvenal des Ursins d'Arvel. Dumouriez planned to turn both Austrian flanks. Accordingly, he divided his army into two wings, giving General Jean-Henri Becquesferon command of the left wing and General Pierre de Riel, Marquis de Bournonville control of the right wing. The French army was made up of a motley collection of Royal Army, Volunteer, and National Guard units. The French made a series of ill-coordinated but enthusiastic attacks which began at dawn and continued throughout the morning. With momentum stalling, Dumouriez ordered a renewed assault at noon. The Duke of Chartres sent a massive French column at the center of the ridge. This gained a foothold which the Austrians could not dislodge. Some French soldiers also enveloped the enemy right, threatening the Austrian rear. In response, Saxe-Teschen withdrew his right and center into Mons. Bewley ably covered the retreat with his left wing. Aftermath. The French reported approximately 650 dead and 1,300 wounded. The Austrians reported 305 dead, 513 wounded, plus 423 men and 5 guns captured. Many of the Austrian casualties were caused by the plentiful French artillery. The Bender Infantry Regiment No. 41 suffered especially heavy casualties, losing 14 officers and 400 rank and file. Mons surrendered to the French the day after the battle, and Brussels fell on the 14th of November. The French populace went wild with joy at this first offensive victory of the war. At first glance, Jemappes was not an impressive French victory. The Austrians had suffered 818 casualties, and lost another 423 men taken prisoner, while France had a higher casualty rate and had failed to prevent the escape of a much smaller army to defend a position of danger. However, in the context of the situation in 1792, with the French army in chaos due to exile of many of its experienced officers, it was a great success. The victory at Jemappes, achieved by inexperienced volunteers over the Austrian regulars, greatly increased the confidence of the revolutionary government in Paris, and encouraged the tendency to aggressive warfare. In the short term, Jemappes gave the French control of the Austrian Netherlands. Mons opened its doors to Dumouriez, and he remained there until the 12th of November. He then moved to Brussels, fighting a rearguard action in Anderlecht on the 13th of November, before capturing the city on the 14th of November. This first French occupation of Belgium would be short-lived, but in the few months that the revolutionaries managed to alienate the population, imposing their ideas of freedom on a conservative population. In 1793, Dumouriez was forced to flee into exile, but his victory at Jemappes was an important step in the direction of the military triumphs of the French Republic. In addition, it ensured that the majority of the battles fought in 1793 would occur outside the borders of France.